Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. I'm a human who cares about supporting other humans. On this podcast, we explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others. I believe that when we feel more connected and seen, magic can happen. And remember, if you find yourself sitting on a comma in your life, you can also talk to me without a microphone. To explore coaching with me and getting off the comma in your own life, check out my information and book a call with me at offthecomma.com. And I'm also doing something different. I'm curating my own sponsor community, local businesses and professionals who I handpick and who align with our vision here. Be sure to check them out, learn more about them on my website and my YouTube channel. In the meantime, let's get into this week's conversation. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Off the Comma. And I'm pretty excited about this episode because this is a test of something that I'm probably going to be doing a lot more. You will not know the difference, but I sure will. And I'm recording to you from the road. So I've taken the studio with me, and I'll talk about that at another time in another context. But recording to you from Phoenix this week. And I'm very, very happy to be talking to another person who is kind of new into my circle. We've just met basically this year through some professional settings and circles, and through a variety of circumstances. Natalia Levin has come into my circle and now is coming into the podcast. And it sounds like she has a very powerful story to share with us today. So I'm going to jump right in and introduce Natalia so we can get into her story and learn a little bit more about her. So Natalia, I'm so glad that we could come together in this way. Like, it's only been a couple of months and now here we are on the podcast, but super excited to continue to develop this friendship and this colleagueship, if you will, with you, and hear what you're going to be sharing with us today. I know you and I will talk a lot more, beyond the podcast, but tell us, how would you like to be known? And tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Hi, Paul. Hi, everyone. Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you all. And I would like to be known as empathetic, passionate, and insightful.
Okay. Would tell us a little bit more about these words. Why do they matter to you? What is it about them that describes you?
Yes, so empathetic because I have a high sensibility to or sensitivity to energy in people. And so it's really easy for me to connect with other people's experiences, feelings, and just really be able to put myself in their shoes and be compassionate and kind and be able to hold space for whatever it is that they need. Passionate because, my goodness, I am a fireball. I am very passionate about everything I do. If I like something, I love it. I'm very, very much an intense type of energy. And so that's that my passion fuels pretty much everything I do in my life.
Mm.
And insightful. This is a funny one because I have always considered myself to be insightful up until a point where a professional expert, someone who was a lot older than me, told me I shouldn't say that I'm insightful or wise because I was way too young to be insightful. And so, after careful review and consideration, I realized that's just who I am. I am, regardless of my age, which I'm not that young. I'm in my 40s. But regardless of that label or that limitation that I got put on, I realized that my life experiences have definitely gifted me with insightfulness and wisdom, and I am able to see a higher perspective in everything. Even in the smallest of situations, I am able to pull rich, insightful um, stories.
Can
Yes,
I jump in and kind of acknowledge you a little bit further beyond what you've shared with us?
please.
So, like, first of all, the passionate piece, right? Like this is very much how I see you as well. Like you show up as passionate. And when you said fireball, I kind of chuckled to myself because you are a fireball. And yet I think a lot of times what happens when we talk about people being a fireball or whatever, it's sometimes associated with like aggressive energy or negative energy and so forth. And I'm like, no, like you embody the fact that passionate and fireball is all the energies, right? Anybody who's highly sensitive or highly emotional, right? Like it's not just one emotion, it's all the emotions. It's not just one energy, it's all the energies. And you definitely show up in the room. So I just want to acknowledge you for that with a big smile. And also this thing about insightful and people telling us whether it's okay for us to call ourselves wise or insightful. It's like the minute we tell somebody that they're too young to be something or whatever, like we kind of reveal the cracks in what we believe to be our own insight and wisdom. Like people wouldn't people would look at you and misjudge you and not
Mhm.
recognize. I didn't even know you were in your 40s. I honestly thought you were in your 20s. So but I try to make it a point is like it doesn't matter, first of all. And second of all, it's none of my business, right? So anyway, so thank you for sharing all of those things.
Yes, thank you, thank you. And you're absolutely right about the passionate aspect. It's not the first time that I've heard other people think of me as maybe too aggressive or too
Mm,
intense or coming at something too with too much energy. But again, I have learned throughout the years to understand that that has nothing to do with me, that it shows how they're viewing me, and their perception of me is none of my business.
so powerful. Yeah. And you're not aggressive. It's how people choose to perceive you. You're just energy, right? You're passionate, like you said. Nice.
Yeah.
Is there anything else before we get into your story and get rolling? Is there anything else you'd like people to know about you or what you do or anything like that? Like you don't have to, but I just thought I'd open the door for you if you'd like.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. I would like people to know that I am absolutely passionate about self mastery. It's what I do in my coaching practice. I have learned that truly everything that happens in life goes back to who you are and how you show up and the things that you think and the things that you say. And so I love helping people connect or reconnect with their true self, who they truly are, outside of labels, outside of rules, outside of norms, outside of everything that pretty much covers you up. It hides who you truly are. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I love talking about this, and I'm grateful that I was able to find this path in life, in that is more than a career, is truly a lifestyle.
Hmm. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm looking forward to see how that kind of plays out in your story as well. So before we get into the five questions, as we ask the same five questions of every guest in every episode, and I'll kind of take you through that process. I always like to start with this question, which is as you think ahead to the, 40 minutes or so of the conversation that we're going to have, what intention would you have for yourself today?
My intention is to remain present and connected to my higher self, or connected with my higher self, so that I am able to share my story authentically and in a way that allows listeners to hear what they need to hear, to receive what they need to receive, and that it will be something valuable and positive that hopefully shifts a little bit of their perspective.
Okay. I hear that intention, and my intention is to create a safe space for you to do that so that you can achieve the intention that you're setting out. And also, exactly what you said, right? Like, we're here to share stories without pointing people in any specific direction. and that someone out there, many someones out there, will hear your story and connect with it, and they'll hear a little bit of themselves in your story. And in doing so, they'll feel a little bit less alone, maybe a little bit more connected, and in the best of cases, a little bit more inspired and even empowered to do something maybe that they hadn't considered doing before, or had been considering and weren't ready or choosing to do. So let's
Thank
get
you.
into it. I love it.
Let's do it.
The first question then, Natalia, where in your life have you found yourself sitting on a comma?
Oof. I would say I have found myself in that space many times throughout my life. However, the one time or the one phase in my life that I feel most impacted by this comma was in my professional life.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to 2020, I struggled a lot in this area of my life. I knew I wanted to help people. I was passionate about helping others in one way or another, but it wasn't necessarily very clear what that looked like. And
Mm-hmm.
so whenever I would think about profession or career, it was always through the traditional lens, right? Where you go to school, you get the good grades, you graduate, you get a career, and then you stay there for some time, and then you climb the corporate ladder. And I definitely did that for a while. Um, but I felt that wasn't the space. Despite climbing the ladder and making more money and advancing in titles and all of these things that traditionally define success, I wasn't happy.
Mm-hmm.
I felt empty. I felt stuck. I felt lost. And I just kept longing. I remember commuting to work just very early in the mornings, praying and asking the universe to guide me, right? To show me the path, to give me a sign where I will clearly know, okay, this is where you're meant to go. This is what you're meant to do. And so that didn't happen for quite some time, for many years.
Mm-hmm.
Still, I just continued to do the best I could. And in the meantime, I was doing a lot of personal development. Um, and then closer to 2020, there were so many things that happened in my life that I just began to feel like I definitely needed a change in my life. The work environments I found myself in were toxic and were lacking a lot of the human touch. I found that there was a lot of mistreatment and abuse of employees, and I found myself unable to help people see a different way to create a healthy work environment
Mm-hmm.
for everyone to thrive in. And so that's where I felt the most stuck, because a part of me truly felt like I wanted to make a difference. I really wanted to make people's lives better, especially at work, because we spend so much time at work. It takes so much of our time and energy, and it's not just work. It's that you take work with you, right? Whatever
Mm-hmm.
happens at work, whatever frustrations you are experiencing at work, you're bringing home with you, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's getting in the way of your personal interactions. It's getting in the way of how you interact with your kids, with your spouse. It really goes beyond the workspace. And I felt like I didn't know how to make an impactful change.
Mm-hmm.
So I was stuck in that space for quite some time.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And while, this is a common story and many people talk about it, let's talk about even deeper your experience. So what I'm hearing, and I'll reflect things back right throughout the episode, and where I reflect things that, they're not quite right or don't resonate, by all means correct me. Um, so you're already kind of in this space where you're questioning the traditional career path and trajectory while being in a place that for sure is not supporting your goals and even the goals being unclear. But I'm hearing you talk about this toxicity and, conflict and confrontation already being uncertain, being in an environment that doesn't contribute to any level of certainty, it sounds like. And then that's now coming home with you as well. And oh, by the way, it's 2020. So everything else in the world is also kind of going to hell as well.
Yes, definitely. And it wasn't all bad, right? There were
Mm-hmm.
aspects of my career that I absolutely adored. And those parts usually involved coaching people, connecting with
Mm-hmm.
people one on one, and really figuring out what they were about and what made them come alive and what was about them that made them be in that space or show up the way they showed up. And so I that was my favorite part of my job. However, the other aspect of it, the parts that I didn't really like, that I felt were very much impacting my health and in every aspect of my life, they were it was really heavy. It was very frustrating. And so it was not only my experience, but it was also me witnessing people really struggle with these environments, really talk about how they felt mistreated and used and abused, and how they didn't want to be there to begin with, and how that was the cause of a lot of interpersonal conflict.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it there's so much that happens at work that I don't think we even have the time to process it fully and to realize what it is that is truly impacting us. So as an
Mm-hmm.
observer, I felt like I was able to see it and realized this goes deeper than just professional development. This is a personal development issue.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so I'm seeing you being the observer, right? You've got your own experience in this, you're watching others, and you're doing something that a lot of people don't necessarily do, or maybe they're not always conscious of, which is kind of seeing the patterns, seeing the trends, and being able to kind of step back and say, what is this really revealing to us? And then, as you said, but there's no time to really even stop and think and process.
Mhm.
Can, can I ask a question, and only to the extent that you feel comfortable sharing? So I hear you describing this broadly, right? What what was the most difficult part about this experience for you? Because you've talked about these things, the environment, the toxicity, the mistreatment, the abuse. What what was the hardest part for you?
The lack of empathy
Mm,
from leaders.
mm,
The workspace lacked so much empathy and so much compassion for people's experiences. It was truly heartbreaking. I, throughout my years in that environment, I heard leaders say things like, the workspace, there is no space for feelings at work. We
mm,
only have to stick to facts. So speak to me, talk to me about facts, nothing else. Or leaders saying, well, people should be happy with getting their paycheck. They should just show up, do the work, and be grateful for what they're getting. I don't know what else they're wanting. I don't know what else they want from us, that they have a job and they're getting paid for it. What else can they want? And so it was realizing that lack of humanness that
mm,
was
mm,
truly heartbreaking. And regardless of how much I wanted to bring to their attention, that ultimately they were dealing with human beings, with people who feel, who have personal lives, who are struggling in so many different ways. It just, it was like talking to a wall. It just, there was
mm,
no, not for 1 second stopping to say, okay, well, let's explore this. Maybe I'm not familiar with what you're saying. Maybe I'm not understanding what you're trying to share with me, but I'm curious. there was none of that. It was very much the traditional concept of work and power, right? Which is very
Hmm.
much, it's cold. It lacks warmth. It lacks humanness.
Mm. Well, and it seems, I mean, if I could self-reference for a moment, like I hear a lot of stories, about people's experience in the workplace, and I have my own as well. And it seems like, it's kind of inherent in the design, with how organizations are built and so forth. I'm not speaking about all organizations, but this kind of element of productivity, and productivity doesn't leave a lot of room for emotions and feelings and thinking, about our human experience. And I can kind of understand why that was the case, right? But even if you allow space for people to kind of reflect on their emotions and so forth, some people have a difficult time with that because they're uncomfortable with just like, hey, let people just talk. They're not really even asking for anything from you. They just need a moment to talk and speak out loud, or just like be acknowledged and validated. They're not asking for you to suddenly blow up the world for them. That can be very uncomfortable for people. And then I think there's also some folks, and we're talking about leaders too, who are afraid to even open the space for that because then they feel like they're going to have to take responsibility for it. And that's also not what people are asking them to do. Most people want to fix their own problems, right? So
Mhm.
I just appreciate you bringing that forward.
And I love that you bring that up, because it's very much true. In my experience, talking to people one on one, that was the main thing that I took away from our conversations, that they wanted to be seen, they wanted to be heard, they really wanted to be acknowledged for their own experience. They weren't asking for grandiose things, and quite the opposite. They were pretty heartbroken because the minimum they were asking for wasn't being offered at all. So
So you've shared this with us. So this comma, kind of in this space, not sure where you want to go next. The place you are doesn't fit, doesn't work. It's not aligning with your goals, and it's unpleasant, to say the least, right? I'm grossly oversimplifying what you've shared with us. The second question is, what did this create for you as a result of sitting on that comma? Like what was that creating for you?
I'm really grateful for those experiences, as hard as they were. I am absolutely grateful for it, because it pretty much became the platform that allowed me to realize what I truly wanted to do in life. And I felt like, with 2020 happening and the world shutting down, I was able to, because we had to distance ourselves, and we all created our own bubbles. I did that, right? I went into my bubble, and it just, I was able to reflect back on all of those years and all of those experiences, and realize that I truly wanted to make a difference. I really wanted to
Hmm.
change the work environment. I really wanted to help companies understand that there was another way, that productivity was truly achieved when people are happy, when people are thriving in their own lives, right? And so, without this comma, without these experiences, I wouldn't have realized that. I wouldn't have come to the conclusion that this issue goes a lot deeper than productivity and ROIs and all of these
Hmm.
metrics that companies utilize. It was really getting to the heart of the matter, which is people. You're
Hmm.
dealing with people, and people want to be happy, and they want to thrive, and they want to be healthy, and they want to feel some sense of control in their lives. So I'm so grateful for what happened in 2020, because that was the space that I needed to come to that realization, to realize that I truly wanted to make a bigger impact, in being in a company, or limited to a company, wouldn't allow me to do that. I really needed to figure out a way to expand my voice and expand my message, and create a bigger impact by offering a different alternative to what is. or was.
Well, and it also seems that this has come up before where it's like the pain becomes the product. Like the experience was your research, even though that wasn't necessarily your intention, but it cemented in you like this is not the thing, and kind of then turns into the product that you wanted to focus on. And I don't mean product in like a commercial sort of way. It's just kind of a metaphor, but that pain turns into then the march, so to
Yes.
speak. What was it? You've shared this with us in numerous ways so far in this conversation, helping people, empathy, humanness. What is it about these themes that are important to you?
Perhaps because most of my life, I didn't get to experience what empathy is, what compassion is, what humanness is. Quite the opposite. I had a pretty troubled and trauma filled upbringing. And later into my 30s, for some reason, I continued to be surrounded by people who behaved in the same manner, who would continue to reinforce this idea that the world was lacking empathy and compassion and a sense of justice. And so when I started doing my own personal development and diving deeper and healing my own trauma and really just understanding myself at a deeper level, that's when I started to realize that there is another way of being, that we don't have to go out into the world and be cold and be manipulative and be controlling, but that we can truly create a world, an environment from the home space to a larger scale, the world at large, where empathy and compassion are foundations.
Mhm.
They're pillars of all interactions and everything that we do. And so I started to recognize how important it is for us to give ourselves the empathy and the kindness and the compassion so that we can spread that around.
So personal experiences, past experiences, sounds like you've been through your own difficult situations before as well. So you're coming into this situation with a lens of sort of what is right, what's not right, what matters.
Yes, I definitely have a soft spot for injustice. And so,
Mm,
I mean, even as I was finishing college, one of the things that I wanted to do was become a lawyer, a human rights lawyer, because I wanted to help bring a sense of justice into the world. I wanted to give the powerless, the hopeless, a voice and a way for them to heal and reclaim their lives in themselves. Um, and so, yes, that sense of justice and that sense of let's bring everyone up, let's uplift and rise up all together has always been important for me. Yes.
okay. Yeah, and I hear that, and I can hear this just kind of sense of connectedness and fairness and equity coming through as well too, just in the way that you describe things, the way that you frame the difficult situations that you've shared so far. So yeah, I can hear how important that is to you. Natalia, let
Yes.
me ask the third question. And then obviously this is a flowing conversation. So if there's more that you want to share or there's anything that you want to go back to and revisit, by all means. But, as you look back on what you shared with us, this comma that you sat on, back around 2020. And so, and around there, what did you learn about yourself, or what are you learning about yourself as a result of sitting on that comma?
I learned to unlearn.
Mm,
Yes, that has been a huge theme in my life and is also something that I want to help others do as well. It's something I also mentioned at the beginning, right? Where I was talking about as our essence or true selves get covered up by layers of rules and norms and expectations that completely limit and keep us playing small. And
mm,
so part of this process that I've gone through has been a lot of unlearning, a lot of really figuring out what it is that, what beliefs, what labels, what values I inherited that kept me stuck, feeling powerless, feeling like my life was supposed to be a 9 to 5 until the age of 70, where I could finally take a breather and maybe hopefully have a good few years to enjoy life. And it just, all of that was carefully questioned and reviewed and looked at from a higher perspective, right? And
Mm.
so I've done a lot of unlearning, and just like I reviewed and analyzed this person's belief that I don't get to be wise, or I don't get to be insightful, I did the same thing with
Mm.
everything in my life, all of the values, going through all of the experiences growing up, what my mom will tell me, right? Because also the way I was raised, I come from a Latin culture where women are, we're heavily imposed, and we're just filled with a lot of limitations, right? We're
Mm.
told who we can be, who we shouldn't be, how we can dress, how we shouldn't dress, how we need to behave so that we can find a husband, and how ultimately our mission in life is to get married and have babies and hopefully die proud of, what we've done in that aspect. And so for me, that's a huge component of life. It is really going deeper into unlearning all of the messages and all of the beliefs that just really kept me playing small, really kept me very confined to playing roles I didn't really I didn't really feel happy playing. I didn't want to step into those roles. I didn't want to step into, I didn't want to continue with that rhetoric. I really wanted a
Mm.
different, more expansive version of my life. And so that was the compass that was guiding my unlearning, my learning to unlearn. Yeah, ultimately, what I learned is to rely on myself and become my own source of happiness and wisdom and safety and confidence and success. I learned that I am the only one that can truly help myself. I stopped looking for heroes and people who would just come and rescue me or give me solutions and make my life better. I really understood that I am truly the only one that's responsible for my life, for my
Mm.
destiny, and for what I do with the time that I'm here. And so it became, it completely changed the way I view life and relationships and myself. And it's I've learned a lot about stepping into relationships from a healthier, more whole way of being, rather than going out looking for people to make me comfortable or make me feel safe or make me, make me give me because I need it. It's just, it's my responsibility to do that.
Mm.
So that's been my biggest lesson.
Yeah. Well, and I certainly appreciate that because I just hear this, what I hear, and you correct me, but breaking free of those norms and expectations, finding your own path. You yourself said expansion, finding my own way, taking responsibility for myself, but in a way that sounds empowering. And I just kind of see you sort of being a nonconformist and I mean, you continue that thought. Like I could keep trying to reflect, but you say it. Like I just see you going your own way. And
Yeah.
even as you started describing that, I could just feel the energy elevating. I could feel the lightness coming in, right?
Yes.
You're
Yes,
smiling right now. People
absolutely.
can't see it, but you're smiling. You're grinning right now.
Yes, yes, yes. And I love that you point this out because that's exactly it. I feel like I was labeled as rebellious for
Hmm.
most of my life. And I used to feel like that was a bad thing. Like, oh, shoot, it's something I need to tame. It's something I need to get rid of. It's something I need to control because it's not welcome, right? And what I ended up learning is that that rebelliousness has been such an empowering, it's a superpower, right?
Hmm.
It's what has allowed me to question traditions. It's what has allowed me to question norms, to question everything in life and really figure out if it aligns with me, with who I am and who I want to be. And so definitely the nonconformist comes through in everything I do because I don't simply want to accept other people's views and beliefs. I'm definitely open to it. That's something that I like doing. I have that student mindset where I'm definitely open to hearing you out and exploring and asking questions and really getting a better understanding of what you think and what you believe. Ultimately, though, I filter through all of that information and I come to the conclusion of whether this is something that's going to serve me. Is it serving me? Is it something that's in alignment with my expansion, with the freedom I want to experience in my life, or is it going to continue to confine me? Is it limiting me in any way, shape, or form? Um,
Hmm.
I feel like this sense of limiting is very much present in all aspects of society, in relationships, in our family dynamics, right? We want to tell people who to be and how to be, and
Hmm.
I just don't like that. I don't like that at all. I feel like we should all have the freedom to decide who we want to be and how we want to show up in the world. And so that's been my guiding principle this entire time.
Yeah. Well, and notice how it shows up throughout your story, right? Like you had this sense from your own personal experience of needing to be free, go your own way, like you even said, rebellious and challenge the status quo. And then if we go back to kind of the original situation that you were sharing as your comma, there was this sense in you of these folks aren't getting to decide for themselves. They're not getting to kind of go their own way. There's not as much freedom or autonomy or agency in the situation that you described. And so that clearly that theme just continues to surface. I have a question for you too.
Yeah.
This I would love to hear your perspective because you said this earlier. I was making a note here about when you were talking about being rebellious or being seen as rebellious, I should say, people not liking to be challenged or questioned. Why do you think that is?
I think there is a sense of safety and comfort from that comes from staying in the familiar, right? And
Mm,
what I've found out is that people don't like their truth to be shattered, right? When you challenge, when you ask questions,
mm,
you're in a way guiding people down a path of confronting their own beliefs, confronting their own truths, confronting their own behaviors. And a lot of people are not ready to do that. A lot of people fear seeing their true self, seeing who they truly are, and seeing what decisions they've made and how their life has unfolded because they feel like they might not have the strength to process it and turn it into something positive, right? A lot of people shy away from
mm,
really seeing themselves in the mirror and recognizing the ways in which maybe not been they have not been the best, right? The best versions of themselves. And part of it is because the society has placed a lot of negative emphasis on mistakes, right? We're so afraid of making mistakes. We're so afraid of failing and, oh, what are people going to think if this doesn't work well, or if I don't, as a leader, if I don't show up as the know-it-all, if I don't show up as the confident and the one that's leading and making the best decisions for everyone, what does that say about me? Right? There's a lot of meaning that we attribute to recognizing our own failures, our own mistakes. Just I
Hmm.
don't see them as failures or mistakes, but that's what they are, or that's what they're labeled as.
Well, and it's interesting, and tell me what you think about this, because you kind of helped me in listening to you describe it this way. It kind of helped me get clear on a thought that I had too, which is I look at myself because that's really what matters when it comes to, I can only question myself when it comes to these things. But this the sort of thing that questioning our beliefs is dangerous. And yet, what I see as a huge opportunity for myself, and I think for others, is being able to recognize that it's okay to question your beliefs and you don't necessarily have to do anything about it, right? Unless you choose to. But even questioning your beliefs doesn't necessarily have to change who you are as a person. And I see over and over again, I've seen it in myself, more importantly, that I get so attached to a belief that the prospect of changing the belief then kind of shatters my identity, right? So belief gets married to identity, and then a divorce between those two things, or questioning it, means divorce between those two things, and yet those two things never had to be married in the first place, right? It's just really interesting. Like, I think that's a really powerful place that you can get to when you can always be questioning your beliefs, and then when you really do choose a belief after having questioned it first, then it becomes so much richer of a belief. I'll
Yes.
stop there because you're nodding. So thoughts, reactions, challenges.
Absolutely. I love how you shared this, because it's so beautifully said. I couldn't have said it better. There is a sense of freedom and empowerment that happens when you start to recognize your own beliefs and how they have limited you or how they have empowered you, because even limiting beliefs can be empowering. They can serve a purpose, right? And so stepping into that space where you can decide what you want to do, it's almost realizing that you have choice, that you
Hmm.
always have a choice, and coming to terms with that belief is incredibly freeing. It truly liberates you from the shackles, and it really helps you understand that, okay, I can choose to stay in this space or I can choose differently. And ultimately, it doesn't mean anything about who I am and what my essence is. And it doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't make me anything other than what I choose to believe it'll make me, right?
Hmm.
And something else that I think about a lot, I think about old age a lot, a lot.
Hmm.
And something that I have come to appreciate is that when you're flexible enough to question your beliefs, to question your values and how they're serving you, you start to become flexible. You start to loosen up, right? You start to find a sense of freedom that allows you to adapt. And that's incredibly helpful when you get to an older age, because
Hmm.
a lot of the times when we attach ourselves to our beliefs and our values and don't want to see any differently and don't want to change and don't want to try anything new, we become rigid, right? And what happens to things that are rigid? So
Hmm.
sooner or later, they break. And so along with that fear of breaking, is just there just comes a whole list of other things that might not be enjoyable. So if you were to take control and start questioning your beliefs and your values, then you start to loosen up a little bit and give yourself that privilege of feeling like, okay, I'm making a choice. And by you making that choice, you're in a way becoming adaptable. You're becoming flexible. You're giving yourself the space and the freedom to be.
Hmm. Hmm. I love how this conversation is unfolding. Let me move into the fourth question here. So, Natalia, what has changed for you as a result of sitting on this comma?
Oh my God, Paul, everything, absolutely everything in my life has changed. The lights came on. I started to realize I was following someone else's path, rules, and norms, and how much grief that was causing me. And so I have changed a lot of how I operate and how I show up in life. And my relationships have changed. I've been able to set boundaries, which it was something I was not able to do before. I've been able to understand myself in such a deeper, in such a profound way
Hmm.
that I have been able to build self-love and self-compassion and kindness, and I've developed a healthy, loving relationship with myself, which I didn't have before, and was the cause of a lot of issues and problems. And truly, I went from being my worst enemy to being my best friend, my own best friend, my
Hmm.
ally. And so that has, of course, impacted my other relationships, my career, the way I engage with life in general, the way I view life, the way I think about life. I no longer think life is meant to be hard and painful and something you have to suffer through, and maybe hopefully eventually at some point you'll enjoy a little bit of pleasure, or you'll get to heaven where you'll be compensated for all of your pain and suffering. So I've been able to detach from those beliefs and realize that I can have joy and safety and peace in happiness here and now. I don't have to wait for anything else to happen. I can show up the way I want to show up. So it's really helped me to show up more intentionally, and more importantly to be able to share my message with the world. I really want people to find their own path and connect with who they truly are, and be able to experience joy and fulfillment in the here and now. I think that will change the world significantly if people can learn to be happier and more at peace with themselves.
Hmm. That's a powerful statement right there in and of itself. Last question, Natalia, what does getting off the comma look like for you?
Getting off the comma looks like creating the space to explore why I'm stuck, giving myself the opportunity to dive deeper into my beliefs, in my blocks, and understanding why they're there in the first place, what created them, and why have I attached to them, or why have I allowed them to drive my life, right? It's questioning everything that I do, in realizing that, okay, well, I have the power to choose whether this is serving me or not.
Hmm.
So it just really is all about creating the space to self-reflect, to really take ownership of your life in an honest and authentic way, so that whatever else you end up doing after the comma, it's powerful and it's meaningful for you or for me.
Yeah. Well, you're speaking from your experience, right? And what I so appreciate about what you're saying there is it continues to reinforce this idea that, when we find ourselves sitting on a comma, stuck on pause or unclear or not sure where to go next or what have you, the kind of the urge or the inclination or the societal training is usually geared towards, oh, I got to figure it out and move on quickly. And you're saying, yeah, you can. And there's a lot to be gained from stopping and looking around and looking within and take advantage of the being stuck to like learn and introspect. And there's so much that can be gained from it.
Absolutely. And I understand it can be a space and a feeling that you want to get away from as quickly as possible, because it doesn't feel good, right? There's so much anxiety and frustration and overwhelm that can happen in that space of being stuck. But at the same time, if you create the space for you to explore it away from people's ideas and advice and beliefs, if you truly give yourself that space, you're pretty much creating a platform where you can grow and expand in ways that you wouldn't have imagined otherwise.
I love that. I love that. Okay. Well, we could keep going for so much longer, and you and I probably will after we're not on the microphone anymore. But let's kind of start to wrap things up. So as you look back on the conversation and a little bit of this story that you've been able to share with us, what would you acknowledge yourself for?
I would acknowledge myself for my resiliency, for sticking with my intuition, for listening to myself and in taking risks. Have in many occasions I have made decisions that people wouldn't necessarily support because they're not the safe path, and I still have gone ahead and taken them and explore them. So I want to acknowledge myself for listening to myself and ultimately making the decisions that have felt good for me, that have felt like they would serve me in a bigger way.
Oh, that's powerful, and I really appreciate you adding in the intuition piece and listening to yourself. That clearly is a theme that resonates throughout your story. Is that there was that inner part of you, that inner knowing, and there were times when it was maybe you weren't listening or weren't as tuned in as much, but the sense was there, and then other times where it's like you're in full conversation with it, and other times where you're like, let guide me, lead me, right? So appreciate
Mhm.
that. Natalia, where can people find you? So if somebody wanted to reach out to you or learn about what you're doing, or maybe even try to connect with you, we'll put the information in the show notes. Where can people learn more about you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram. My handle is I am the one I am, which
Mm,
goes back to what I was saying earlier. I am the one that's responsible for myself. And yeah, Instagram will be the best platform. I should say, though, I'm new to social media. So please bear with me in terms of messaging and all that. I am learning how to be in that space. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about my philosophy, you can visit my website,
mhm.
peak-empowerment.com. And yeah, those are the best places for people to find me at.
Great. And if they connect with you there, then as you grow or expand or choose to do other things in the social media space, then they'll already be following you and can get those updates too.
Yep.
Cool. One of the last things we do before we close out is very important to me, and it's important because it's also part of your story. I like to create a space where we can lift other people up. And so I'd like for you to share any acknowledgments that you have, people in your sphere that you would like to give a voice to, promote, or boost. And that could be causes or organizations or even just individual creators or people that you know. Who would you like to acknowledge? And we'll put their information in the show notes.
Thank you. Thank you. Firstly, I definitely want to acknowledge my ride or die, my partner, Guido Levin, because whew, I just get emotional thinking about it.
Mm.
He's been my biggest supporter and teacher. He's taught me a lot. So I really want to acknowledge him for all of his support and love and lessons. And I also want to give a shout out to my spiritual mentor, Michael Beckwith. I've learned a lot about connecting with a higher power or God or whatever you want to call it. He's been definitely instrumental in helping me connect with that part of myself. Organizations wise, definitely IPEC, the organization I got my professional coaching certification from, because that was absolutely life changing and they do amazing work. More locally, this nonprofit organization called Opening Doors. which does amazing work providing services for refugees, immigrants, survivors of human trafficking, and also help expand economic opportunities for underserved communities.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, I am an animal lover and defender, so I definitely want to give I want to recognize the Front Street Animal Shelter for the beautiful work that they do with animals.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate all of these acknowledgments, and all of that information will be in the show notes with links so people can check them out. And just on a personal note, I don't know that there's anybody in the Sacramento area who hasn't touched in one way, shape, or another the Front Street Animal Shelter. So that's
yeah,
great.
they do a great job.
A little local promo and plug. So Natalia, thank you for coming on and sharing this with us. And I just feel really great about what you've shared. Not that I need to, but I'm so happy that you shared this with us. And I know this is going to reach so many people, particularly where we are, in the world today. And I will look forward to having more conversations with you in the future. But thank you again so much for coming on with us. And we'll hear from more from you again in the future when we do a check-in episode with you. But in the meantime, have a great weekend.
Sounds great, Paul. Thank you so much. It has been an honor to be here with you and to share my message with the audience, with the listeners. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. What an honor it is for me to witness these powerful stories. I hope you feel the same way too. Think about what you learned from this conversation. What stood out for you? What challenged you? What inspired you? And I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling and reflection. Surprises can reveal themselves to you when you do this. And if you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. Let's spread the word. Let's continue to build connection. And if you do discover something you'd like to unpack further, book a call with me and let's talk about it. My links are in the show notes. Be sure to like this episode, follow the podcast here on this platform and social media at Off the Comma, and feel free to comment and interact with these posts and episodes. Check out my website for workshops, events, and my sponsor community. I'm covering the costs of production by curating my own sponsors who align with our vision. Be sure to check them out. They're all powerful people and businesses. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. As always, keep noticing and keep listening.